Well, good evening, everybody. I hope we are all well this evening. And yeah, I was just about to say I've got a fancy new intro that I've been wasting far too much time on. So I hope everyone enjoyed that. I hope the music was the right volume as well. Spent a lot of time faffing with volumes, and then OBS decided on Sunday it was going to completely crap out on me and make everything very very challenging. The music was very quiet. Good to know, Dougal. Thank you for that. I will up it for the next stream. Oh, interesting. Okay, so one good volume, one bit quiet. Okay, we'll see how we go with that. In terms of audio tonight, if it's not right at any point, if I'm too loud, if the game sounds aren't loud enough or anything like that, please let me know. I'm not a streamer. I don't do this very often. After this and any subsequent tutorials and World Flight next week, I probably won't stream again until World Flight next year, or maybe across the pond. But for now, voice audio is excellent. Thank you very much there, Dougal. Okay, cool. So we'll jump into the purpose of this evening and what we're going to cover, I guess, then, really. So as you can see, we are sitting here. We're in Gothenburg. It's a cloudy morning here in Gothenburg. I'm not on live weather. Live weather's a bit horrible in Gothenburg at the moment, so or at least it was an hour ago when I loaded into the sim. So I picked some big and bold from the preset weathers, and it's early morning. Yep, that's what I was looking at when I logged in, Rambog. So yeah, we'll go with this nice looking weather here. But it's early morning. Obviously, you can see that we've got the 737 Max in front of us from iFly. Yes, low cloud base here, but it looks good. So That's all that matters. We ain't going to be flying today. I will just point that out. Today's tutorial is about getting us from cold and dark up to the point where we are sitting at the holding point of the runway and ready to take off. I think that should take us about 2 hours or so, depending on how many questions we get and things like that. The next tutorial will go into the takeoff, the cruise, the descent, and the landing, and then shutdown. But for now, it's all about getting the cabin set up, taking it from cold and dark to that point where we're ready to take off. In terms of questions and so on, I am in the Flight Sim Voice channel on Discord. That's on the Two-Tone Murphy Discord. For anyone that may be joining us that isn't already part of that, there is a link there for you to go and have a look at that. I am on mute in Discord at the moment, so rather than being having voice on all the time, there will obviously be a bit of a delay, so I want everyone to listen through Twitch, because if I'm pointing at something in the cockpit or something along those lines, if you're listening through the Discord audio, you'll hear it before you see it, and it won't necessarily make sense. So if you've got a question, by all means just throw it into the chat. I'm looking at the chat, and I can answer any questions from there. If you've got a question that you feel would be easier to ask on voice, feel free to jump into the voice channel, put a note in chat saying you got a Discord question. I'll unmute myself. We'll have a conversation about whatever it is, and then I'll answer those questions, and then we'll go from there. But yeah, whichever way round you want to do it, I'm more than happy with. And we should get, if I've programmed this all right, we should get the Discord audio coming through into the stream as well. So you will hear people's questions if we get any Discord questions. So with those housekeeping points out of the way, let's jump into the tutorial. So I'm going to run through a number of different elements today. As I say, we're going to go from cold and dark to ready for takeoff. There are some elements I'm going to go through that they will do in real world flying, in real life, that we don't necessarily have to do on the sim, but I think it's also useful just to have an understanding of some of the systems and the reasons they do those checks. I'll go through some of the differences between the iFly 737 MAX and the PMDG NG version, and just sort of, how to set them both up. Obviously, I can't show you the PMDG at the moment because I'm logged in with the iFly, but I will highlight and tell you the differences as we're going through. So the first thing that we do, we're a pilot here. We're standing on the tarmac. I mean, it might be a little bit high here. You might be a very tall pilot, but obviously the first thing you do is go and get in the aircraft. So fingers crossed that all my buttons work, but this should take us into, here we go, the aircraft. And obviously the first thing you sort of come to, assuming this is, first flight of the day, we're early morning, plane's been sitting on stand overnight, and so the first thing we do, we come in, and it was stuttering. Shouldn't be stuttering. There we go. That's better. But yeah, obviously cabin's all cold and dark, plane's all cold and dark. The only light we have that we can see is this one up here, which is our little ground power light. But other than that, everything is very quiet and very sort of dark and switched off. So when a pilot first comes in, there are a certain number of checks that pilot or the first officer, whoever's first onto the plane, will do. So they call them the it's the initial flight deck check. So as we he says pressing the wrong button. There we go. So as we move into the cabin, there's an acronym for these initial flight deck checks. It's called the Bell checks. And those checks basically are you come along and you switch the battery on. Now I'm just going to change my angle here because we can't really see the battery switch very easily. But if I press this one, yeah, there we go. We should get into being able to see the overhead panel a little bit easier. So we switch the battery on as a first port of call. In the PMDG, the switch, you click the switch and it will just switch the battery on. You then have to click the guard to close the guard. With the iFly, you switch the battery on and the guard just automatically closes. They've programmed it to automatically close. So there's our first difference between the PMDG and the iFly. So that's our first check, bell, of the bell checks. So its battery is on. Next, we check that the hydraulic pumps are off. This is a really important one because the hydraulic pumps, the electronic hydraulic pumps, I should specifically say, the engine-based hydraulic pumps will most likely be switched on. They very rarely actually ever get switched off. But we check that the electronic hydraulic pumps are switched off. And the reason behind this is that as soon as they get power, that front nose wheel will come under extreme hydraulic pressure, and if that front nose wheel has been left slightly wonky, say, but for example, after you've come in on stand and you turn on those hydraulic pumps, the electronic hydraulic pumps, it will instantly try and straighten itself. And if the ground crew have already attached the tow bar, say for example, or they're working doing something on that front wheel and it suddenly turns, that tow bar could turn into a hydraulically powered battering ram and do some damage. So we make sure they're off. Now the reason we can do that after the battery's switched on is that these electronic hydraulic pumps are not powered by the battery. They need AC power to function. So, and as long as we check this before we put the ground power on or before we switch the APU on and they're off, then we're all good. So we've checked that. So that's our second check item. So as I say, it's the bell check. So that's battery. B, electronic hydraulic pumps, check they're off. Next one we check, landing gear lever. Pretty important. Again, similar situation. If these are powered again by the hydraulics. So what we don't want is to then switch on those electronic hydraulic pumps when we get to that point and realize that the landing gear lever is in the up position, because, well, things would go pretty badly if that happened. So we check that down and we've got our 3 green lights there to say that all the gears are locked. So that's all good. The last one is called the library, or the ship's library. This one really isn't important in flight sim, but there is a set of documentation with every aeroplane, certificates, maintenance logs, etc. You check all of that documents are in place and there. None of those are really important in flight sim specifically, but it's good to know what you do in the real world checks. The only one that you really need to do on that is battery. But yeah, I just thought I'd go through some of the real world things as well. So once you've done that, we then need to go and do the next stage of our checks. And I'm only going to spend sort of 10 or 15 minutes on these checks, and then I'll get into FMC and doing all the fun stuff. But the next steps are our checks. So further on with the cockpit safety inspection, we have now checked that we know that the electronic hydraulic pumps aren't going to come on when we switch the ground power on. The battery on these planes don't last particularly long, so the next thing we do is switch that ground power on. If it's not connected or we don't have ground power available, it will be the APU. But most places this plane will be, you will have ground power available. We saw that light when we first came into the cockpit. It was already there. It was already showing that we've got it available. So at this point, we switch on the ground power, and all of a sudden more lights come on, more sound starts happening, and hopefully you should be able to hear some of those sounds in the sim. Let me know if the volume on the sim's not quite right, but you should be able to hear some of the sounds of the sim now. So we've got ground power on. Is that what that alarm is? Battery draining. So, yes, I couldn't hear the alarm. I've got my sim turned down slightly. But, yes, I'm assuming you were hearing a sort of beeping sound. Yes, if you leave the plane on the battery for too long, it will warn you that it's discharging with a beep. Yeah, that it needs either the APU or some ground power to stop the battery going flat. So, yeah, hopefully that beeping should have stopped now. Let me just turn my volume up a bit. Okay, yeah, it seems to have stopped now, and yes, had to take you. Yeah, it's not your house, don't worry. It was definitely the aeroplane. Cool, so, next bit of the checks then, we are checking now so before we let passengers on, we want to make sure that the safety systems are working. We want to know if there's a problem, if there's a fire, or we need to evacuate the plane. We want to know that this plane is going to tell us that there's a problem, so we know to evacuate. And we do that by doing three sets of firstly of fire panel checks. So if we have a look here at this one, yeah, here we go. So come down here. So this is our first fire panel here, and as you can see on the side here, we have a test switch here with two sides. You've got fault in op and overheat and fire, and we need to test both sides of these. On the fault in op one, when we run the test, we are looking for 5 lights to appear, and I have to be on a slightly different angle to show you this, because we are looking for he says trying to get into a position. There we go. So we are looking for a set of lights both up here on our master caution and on the fire panel itself. So you come in, you switch your ground power on, it's telling you there's loads of issues, and we're expecting that because we've not switched everything on, we've not configured things. So for the moment, hit the master caution and we clear all that. We now check the fault in op by clicking it, and as you can see, we should now have 5 lights. So we're looking for the 2 master cautions, one on the captain's side and one on the first officer's, which we've got. You've also got on the left-hand recall panel the overheat stroke detection light illuminated. This just tells you that it's the overheat panel you should be looking at. I'll come on to more about those recall panels in a little bit. And then you've got 2 lights down the bottom on the fire panel itself, one that says fault and one that says APU detect in op. So if I just go and zoom back in here a bit, just so you've got a slightly better view of that, switch it back on. So yeah, you've got fault and APU detect in op. So we check that, make sure there's 5 lights. That's the first fire test. The second one is your overheat fire test. So this will simulate there being a lot of fires, and for this one we're looking for in the same places, but we're looking for 11 lights this time. So this one's a little bit harder to do. I'm going to have to click it a few times because in the iFly there is no way to click and hold it to that particular side. But up the top here, we're looking for 5 up the top. So you'd have the 2 master cautions, the 2 fire warning lights, the big red ones, and again that overheat detection panel one that comes up. So we flick that across. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you're seeing all of those there. So that's the first 5. You've got the big bell. You can't really miss that. Oh, got a couple of questions. Dougal says, have to confess I'm lazy. Yes, I 100% with you there, Dougal. I'm exactly the same. I will skip most of these, but I wanted to, for completeness of this tutorial, just make sure that I've covered them so people know what we're doing. But realistically, you know that unless you've got random faults on, you know this plane is going to be functional. You know this plane is going to work. It's not going to break. So there isn't really any need to do the checks. But we'll run through them. We'll make sure that they're covered, and then anyone that wants to do the ultra realism, and I have been known to do it a few times. I'm a little bit sad like that. I have literally done it, and I'm quite looking forward to in 2024 being able to actually go and do the walk around and actually do the, without having to press all the weird keys and make the stuff move around. Doing the actual walk around on a 737 would be kind of cool. So we've done that first. We've seen the 5 lights up the top there. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 up the top. You've then got the 3 big red lights here of engine 1, APU and engine 2. You've got a red light there for your wheel well, and you've got your 2 engine overheat lights. And in total that's 11 lights. So that's what we're looking for. And again, once you know this, it's really quick to see, yeah, I've got all the ones I expect. It's a very visual thing, and we know the bell's working as well because we've heard it. So that's our 2 first fire tests. 2 more fire tests to do. I think I said there was only 3, but there's actually 4. So the first one is, he says, just moving the camera about, there we go, is our squibs. Silly name, but it is what it is. Our squibs here are these 3 little green lights, and they are basically detonation charges. There are 3 detonation charges. Well, actually there's 6 of them. And they are the things that detonate to discharge the anti-fire powder that goes into the engine, or whatever it is that they use to try and put out the fire that's in an engine or in the APU. I don't know exactly what it is, but basically, if those charges don't work and don't explode, then the anti-fire material won't work either. So we've got a little switch here, 1 and 2. So you click it one side, you should get 3 green lights. Click it to the other side, you should also get 3 green lights. That's all you got to do and check with that. And then the last, oh, thanks Stream Elements. Don't think that will work. I've got some random things set up for World Flight next week, so I thought I'd switch them off, but apparently not. So yeah, thanks bot for being a very usual sort of bot. Anyway, so moving back to this, the last fire check we need to do is our cargo hold. We want to know if there's a fire in our cargo hold. We definitely want to know if there's a fire in our cargo hold. Hopefully no one's put any batteries in there and they're catching fire or anything stupid. Really easy for this one. Is 1 test button. You get the bell again. You get 2 green lights there to show you that the extinguishers are functioning and working, which relate to your discharge button here, and you've got your red buttons here to say that which cargo hold you want to arm to set off the fire extinguishers in. So that's all working, and that is our fire tests. So the next test we do are on our overhead panel. So if we go back up to our overhead panel here, next thing we want to do, we're happy that if we've got any fires or anything like that, the plane's going to alert us. Next thing, if we need to evacuate, we want to turn on our emergency exit lights. So that's these. Again, just turn that to armed, not on in this case, just armed. The iFly closes that guard over. With the PMDG, you would need to click the guard. Then the next test we do is, he says, trying to get to a useful position to show you, is the throttle test. And the reason we do this, so the 737, and this one's important actually for the sim as well. The 737 has a takeoff out of curiosity, if you don't have ground power, would you do the fire test before starting the APU, considering you want to know if the APU is on fire? Hey Jave, good to see you. Thank you for joining. I'm glad you're finding it interesting. Rambog, yes. If you don't have ground power for whatever reason, you would do the fire test prior to switching on the APU, because yes, exactly that. You want to know if there's a fire when you start that APU. So you would come in, you'd switch the battery on, you'd then do your fire test. So it's slightly different ordering for APU only power, but yeah, you come in, you do those tests first, then you'd switch on your APU, which would give you the rest of the power. So yes, next thing we're testing is the throttle. The reason we're testing this, much like the Airbuses, but the Boeing as well, it has a takeoff config warning. So if you try and advance the throttle at a point where you're not ready for takeoff, you've, I don't know, not set your flaps, or you've got your parking brake on, or something along those lines, it's going to shout at you and say, "Oi, you've got a problem here, don't take off." The reason we check this now is that we need to know, when we know that it's in a configuration that it's not ready for takeoff, that it's going to warn us. And there's precedent for this happening in the past. There have been accidents where they haven't tested whether or not it's going to beep at you when you know it's not ready for takeoff. An airline has taken off and it's not functioned for whatever reason. They weren't configured for takeoff and all sorts of horrible things went on. So there is a reason we test this now, and it's a really simple test. Throw your throttles forward, you get a big beep. You get in the Max, you've got your lights up here, which is shouting takeoff config. In the NG, I don't think there are any lights. I can't remember off the top of my head, and it's been a couple of weeks since I logged in, but I don't think there are any lights to say takeoff config, but you still get your beep. At the end of the day, you know what the beep sounds like. Right, we'll make that shut up. So push it forwards, pull it back. You've now checked. You know that you're not going to, that you're hearing a warning that you're not ready for takeoff. So that's all good. Every time I think I'm in an Airbus and I arm the spoilers for takeoff. Yes, Boeing, don't arm the spoilers. It will beep at you. It will get grumpy. Some pilots do them independently. Well, that's something I didn't know. Thank you for that, Dougal. That's a really interesting one. And yeah, that's a good point, really. Yeah, certainly modelled correctly in here that it works independently as well. DVD Combo, welcome, nice to see you. You are correct, because while executing the test, if the APU detect in-op lights in not illuminated, it says do not run the APU. Yes, that is very correct. Moving on then. So we've done the thrust levers, we've tested all of that now. There are a couple of other bits. So the next one that they do in real life is test the microphone on the PA system. So in the Max, you've got a little handheld microphone here. In the NG, and you might even have it in the Max, yes, you've got a plug-in point here for the passenger address system as well, if you want to plug one in there. But you've also got your handheld microphone there. The reason we test that is because we want to be able to talk to the passengers if there is an emergency and you need to tell them to evacuate. We need to know that actually that microphone's working. There's no point us going, there's a fire, please evacuate the plane, if no one can hear us. So we check that. And then this one is always fun, he says, pressing the wrong buttons. We check this little panel here. Now, can I get into a good position? He says, oh dear, I can never remember which buttons on the keyboard it is. There we go, this will do. This is the manual gear extension access door. And it's nicely modelled, actually, both in the iFly and in the PMDG. If you click it, it will load up and it will show you the three things, and as far as I'm aware, I'm not going to click them, but as far as I'm aware, they work. But we need to check that this door is closed. What I understand from a few different pilots that I've listened to or talked to, they generally tend to put their foot on it and make sure it's properly shut. The reason behind checking that is that, and there's no warning light to tell you that it's not shut or anything like that, but the reason is, inside this panel, inside these holes and these pins here that go into those holes, is a micro switch. And if that panel is not closed and that micro switch is not engaged, the hydraulic gear retraction system will not function. Because obviously if you've opened this up, you don't want the gears to suddenly go back up at some point. So it disables the hydraulic gears. So you check that it's flush with the floor, you check that it's shut, generally, as I understand, just by putting your foot on it, giving it a stamp, making sure it's closed. So that's that. Thank you, DVD Combo, for confirming that. Yeah, so that's cool. So you check that that's flush with the floor, and that is all good. So you check that, and then the last thing you check is that you've got your gear pins. So there are 3 gear pins on the PMDG NG variant. They are modelled in the cockpit as sitting here. You can see them sitting there. They're not modelled on the Max. I'm not sure if that's that iFly have missed them, or if they're stored somewhere different in the Max. But they're not here. But you would check that you've got all 3 gear pins there. So you check that they're all there. So that is your third set of tests that we run through and check. If the manual extension door is open, it's not possible to retract the gear. Yeah, exactly that. So yeah, make sure that's shut. Those are our then next set of cockpit checks. And then the last one, which again is important, less so in the sim. There's a couple of bits that you do want to do in the sim in this one, but most of these you won't necessarily want to do. You know, they're not really necessary because we know that they're all going to work. And just bear with me, I'm just going to take a quick drink. Doing a lot of talking, that's better, thank you very much. So yes, go back to sleep stream elements. I don't even know why the response isn't working. Anyway, whatever. So the next one is what's called a rainbow scan, and there's a reason it's called a rainbow scan. And if I come to about here, I think it should be, I'll take you through it. So, I'm not quite far forward enough. Go to about there. So, rainbow scan. We start on the right hand side of the cockpit, and the first thing we're checking is the circuit breakers, and it should be a relatively easy thing to check here. So when these circuit breakers are popped out, unfortunately they're not modelled in either the iFly Max or the PMDG NG variants. When they're popped out, it'll be a little bit further forwards, and there is a white band that will show. So it would be really easy to see just looking up and down here if it's popped out and if there's any white bands. If they are popped out permanently because a particular function isn't enabled on this plane, for example, or something along those lines, in the iFly we haven't got any of that. In the PMDG NG variants, you can see that there are a few that are permanently popped out. They have little collars on them, generally coloured collars, so you'll be able to identify, yes, they're popped out, but they're meant to be popped out, and there's no white band. That collar covers up that white band. So we do a first scan on this side to check that all of our circuit breakers are in or meant to be out. Next thing you check here is your spare bulbs. You check that this is closed properly, you check that you've got enough spare bulbs and everything in there. Interesting fact, or at least I think it's interesting, I think there's only one bit of maintenance that a Boeing pilot or first officer can do, and that is change their own light bulbs. Each one of these lights has 2 bulbs in it, so you've got redundancy there. You can generally tell if a bulb has, if one bulb has failed. They will both illuminate, so like that Captain Pitot there has 2 bulbs in it. You'll be able to tell if like one side is brighter than the other, and then they can change that out. So you've got redundancy, and the pilot or first officer can change them by using the spare bulb kits in here. So you check that the spare bulbs are all in there. You check that the emergency escape rope is in there, because if it's not, that's not ideal. You also check that the end that is attached to the plane is definitely attached to the plane. Last thing you want to do is open the window, throw the rope out, and it all goes down to the bottom, because, well, that's just going to be embarrassing, really, along with anything else. So, as you can see, what we're doing is we're starting to make a bit of a rainbow over here. So we're starting to take that shape of a rainbow, which is why it's called a rainbow scan. So next we come up to here, and you've got your airspeed warning, so your overspeed warning, and your stall test warning. So we want to check these. We should all know roughly what the sound is for overspeed. It's very similar in both the Airbus and the Boeing, but you hit it and you get that sound. You check both of them. Again, got 2 systems for redundancy, but we hear that. You also check your stall warning test here. So that's your stick shaker. So you press 1, you get your sound, the stick will shake, and then you press number 2 and you get the same again. So we check that. You then check your flight recorder to make sure that is functioning. In this, you move it to test, and as far as I understand it, I'm pretty sure this is right, but if you move it to test and it says off, then that indicates that there's a problem. If you move it to test and no light comes up, then that's fine and working. Then set it back to normal. Another interesting point, you've got 2 guarded switches here. They are in different directions for a particular reason. So your flight recorder one is the one you want to check and test. You don't want to touch this one. So this is to do with your oxygen, and this is your passenger oxygen. If you open this up and you switch that to on, if it's the first flight of the morning and you haven't had your coffee and you're not paying attention, as soon as you switch that on, every single overhead oxygen mask is going to come down, and then you've got a big problem. So basically, don't touch that one. Make sure the guard's down, but don't touch it. Yeah, yikes, exactly that. At that point, as far as I understand it, there's big delays, and maintenance doesn't like you because they basically have to come and stuff them all back up into the ceiling and close the panels, and it's all a big pain in the arse. Yes, one hell of a Monday morning. Ha! Rambog. Now, does it work in the sim? I tried it yesterday because I thought, what happens if I do it? It's not modelled, unfortunately. Certainly not in the iFly. I haven't tested it in the NG, but it is not modelled in the iFly, unfortunately. So that would be good. Carrying on then with our rainbow tests. So we've checked that the all of the airspeed warning works, the stall warning works, and the flight recorder works. We're then checking our ECCs are on, so they should be on and guarded. You can see the little on indicator there. Don't need to touch them, don't worry about them. Again, in the sim, you're not going to be worrying about any of this because you know it's going to be functioning. Crew oxygen is the next test, and as far as the guidance goes, as long as this is over 1000 psi, that's fine. If it's under 1000 psi, it's a call to ground crew. Oi, get your oxygen bottle and top me up, please. Which is quite an easy job, as I understand it. But as long as this is over 10 on the gauge, all good. That's all you need to test. So we've done all of those. Next part of your rainbow scan, and this one is important, this you will need to do in the sim, is get your IRS going. IRS is your positioning system. It's an incredibly sensitive bit of kit. It's so sensitive that it can detect the rotation of the Earth based on where you are. That's how sensitive this thing is. So it takes a bit of time to align. So to switch these on, you turn both of them onto nav, and what we should see is that the on DC light comes on because we're getting pressure power from the battery and ground power as well, and then they should go off after 10 seconds. So you should get on DC for 10 seconds. You should also get the align light to come on and stay on. So we turn each one of these on to nav, and we get on DC coming on, we get the align coming on. The on DC should stay on for a bit, and then both of those go off, and we now know that that's starting its process to work. Confirmed it does not work in the PMDG. Thank you for confirming that, Rambog. I didn't think it would. I can imagine the frames that would take to model the falling of some oxygen masks, but anyway. So with both the PMDG and the iFly, you can speed up the lining of the IRS. Generally, the IRS will take 7 to 8 minutes to align. Both of them have, both planes have ways of setting the IRS to a shorter time frame. So you can have instant on all of the, on both of them, where it just instantly it's working, that's it, it's done. With the PMDG, I believe it's double speed, so it takes about 3.5 minutes or so, and with the iFly, I think it's a different speed. I'll show you on the tablet in a little bit. If you want to know how long it's going to take, you can rotate this to status. So you've got a status indicator here. So it's now saying we're 1 minute away from being aligned. It takes about 2 and a bit minutes on the setting that I've got it on. So I think that's like 66% sped up or something along those lines. But that just gives you an indication here that that is aligning and how long it's going to take. So we'll put that back to PPOS. That's its standard, because that'll tell you where what its positioning is. So carrying on with our rainbow scan, then we've switched the IRSs on. We know that's now working. We now need to check our leading edge devices work. So to do that, it's just a press of that, make sure that all the lights come on, and that's it. You check that they all work, and that's all good. We've now got a line flashing here. That basically means it's aligned. If we go back to status, it's I'm not sure what that number means, but it basically means with it flashing, it now means that it's aligned, but it needs further input, and that's where we tell it where we are based on our GPS location, and I'll come on to that in the FMC very, very shortly. So we've checked our leading edge devices. They're all lit up, they're all working, and then we come over here. We also check the emergency escape rope on this side, and then the last bit of our rainbow scan is the captain's side circuit breakers. So we complete that rainbow from one side to the other, going over, checking all of these, all the circuit breakers are done, and we've switched on the IRS. Realistically, again, because we only need to, we know that we haven't got random failures on, we know the plane's going to work, the only one we really need to do here is switch on the IRS to get that going. So that is all of our sort of main cockpit checks and everything like that. There are a few others, but we'll get into the meaty bits of the FMC and things now, the more exciting bits. Dougal, I'm hardly flying anything since this dropped. It still has a couple of bugs, but I love it. Yes, it does have a few bugs. It is a very, very good implementation. I've been very impressed. I don't know the Max as well as I know the NG. I'm still learning bits about the Max, but yeah, it's pretty bloomin' good. I am enjoying it as well. So next thing we do then is we get into the seat. So we need to slide that to the side to do that. I do like the fact that they've modelled that. That's pretty cool. So we do that, and we then get into our seat. There we go. Oh, I'm very tall here. Hold on. There we go. And the pilot would then, at that point, do all of the positioning things. And one thing I discovered whilst prepping for this tutorial is that the actual rudder pedal adjustment works. So you can wheel that round and set your rudder pedals. Now I'm a short ass, so I always pull that all the way forwards because yeah, I'm short and I need to. But yeah, that's a nice little thing that works there. So we are now in here. You would do one more test as well. There's a little light switch here. This tests all the lights in the cabin, and this goes back to checking that you've got spare bulbs and everything like that. But your little light switch here, it's in basically the same place, I think, on the NG from memory. But if you flick that up to test, every single light in the cockpit will now come on, and you're able to check, and you should be able to identify pretty quickly if one of them hasn't lit up. You can see all of the MCP has lit up, all of the numbers and everything like that, just like, yeah, exactly a Christmas tree, Dougal. So you can easily check there that all of your bulbs are working, and then you set them back to whatever you want. If you're nighttime, you can set them to dim or bright. So that is that. We are now into doing a bit around the FMC. So IRS is aligned or aligning, depending on which setting you've got, but it's asking us here to enter the IRS position on the FMC. So to do that, we need to go into the FMC. We've got an ACARS button and a DFDAU button. Neither of those are modelled or work in this, so don't worry about them. The only one we need to really care about is your FMC. So we click the FMC button, and it sort of leads us very much through, except the wheel well light. What do you mean by that, DVD? Does that one not light up when you do the light test? During the light test won't illuminate. Oh, that's interesting. Oh, yeah. I never noticed that. There we go. I have learnt something today. Do you know why that is? Huh. Never noticed that before. So, yeah, that doesn't light up. There we go. We've all learnt something there today. That's cool. So, back to our FMC. So yes, it basically guides you through what you need to do. So, first thing we need to go to is your top left of the screen here. So this is called your ident page. And we go into here, and at this point you're looking for just a few things on here to make sure that you're in the right sort of plane, you're expecting the right plane. So you're in a 737-800, you want to look at your AIRAC details. When is it valid till? So this one's valid till the 31st of October. So that a couple of days away. And then we get a new AIRAC. What engine you've got and if you're expecting that engine. And you've got a second page here as well, which tell you some bits of information. Don't worry about that. I don't know what that is. If you really want me to find out what all that information is, I can do, and I'll tell you on the next session. Leave me a note. But yeah, basically you just want to check that you've got the right AIRAC. That's the most important bit of information there. And then you're guided through by your bottom right hand button. So the next page that we need to go to is your position initialization page. And you can see down here in what's called the scratch pad that it's asking you to do something. It's asking you to enter your IRS position. So the IRS has done its aligning. It knows where it is, but it needs confirmation that it's right, basically. And you can see here we've got some boxes. Now on the Boeing FMC, if you've got boxes, that means it needs an input. That has to be put into the system. Where you've got dashes, that's optional to put in. So there is a few different ways that you can get your position. Theoretically, your last position should be where you still are. You know, you parked up, you stopped at your stand, and that should be the same. But you can't guarantee that, because if you've been towed or something with the plane off, then that's going to be out of place if you've been put back in a different place. You can also get the information from the plane's database. So we are in Gothenburg, which is ESGG. So if we put that in, that gives us the airport ref, and it gives us a set of coordinates here that is the general coordinates of the airport. I think it's the direct center point of the airport, or maybe the coordinates of the tower, one or the other, I can't remember off the top of my head. But obviously every single gate has its own coordinates, and you'll be able to find the coordinates from your charts, but it should also be in the database. Now, if I remember rightly, we're on gate 72 or stand 72. I'll just double check. No, we're not. We're on 78. I was close. 72's down there. We're on 78. So if we then put in stand 78 here, we then get another set of coordinates here. Now we can verify that we're in the right place and we are on stand 78 by a couple of things. Our last position, which you can see now matches up. And if you go on to page number 2, you can see here every single menu in the FMC, your page indicator is at the top right. So we've got one of 3 possible pages here. If we go on to the next page, our GPS systems will have their coordinates in there. And we can see 39.8, 17.2, check there, 39.8, 17.2 in our last position, so they haven't moved the plane, and that's what gate 78 says as well. So any one of those you want to take is you just click on it, it puts it down into the scratch pad here, slightly different notation, but that's fine, and then you hit set IRS position. Now as soon as we do that, things will come into life. Oops, didn't mean to change that. Put that back. So you can see at the moment we've not got a map, we've not got our virtual horizon or anything like that, because it's not 100% sure where it is. It thinks it knows where it is, but it's not 100% sure, and it needs us to confirm by telling it the IRS position. So as soon as we enter that, and assuming that the IRS has finished aligning, if you're putting in the IRS position before it's finished aligning, it will do this when the alignment finishes, but as soon as you hit that, boom, we're all of a sudden got lots of different screens. It knows where we are. You've got your artificial horizon here, and lots of other information appears. Most airports will also have the stand coordinates on a sign visible from your cockpit that can be used for verification as well. They're there at ESGG in real life, and if I have the Orbex scenery, well, there you go. Yes, that's a very good point, actually. If you're sitting on the stand, I certainly know in Dublin it does, and yeah, you're right. Most airports do have that. I guess I don't have the Orbex scenery for Gothenburg. I haven't got those, but good to know that that's there as well, so you could manually put it in from there. Gibbo, good evening, sir. I hope you're well. Nice to see you. Just going to take a quick drink again. Right, super tasty beverage, as Murph would say. So, getting back to this then. So we've now told the FMC where we are. So we've got our IRS all in. Realistically, you don't need to worry about the reference airport or the gate. Just go onto page 2, grab one of your GPS coordinates and throw it into the IRS. That's for the speed of doing it in the sim. You don't need to do all that verification. You know that the GPS is going to show you your exact correct position wherever you are, so just grab that and throw it in, and that will complete that task. Next then, things that we do. Real world, again, don't really need to do this, but real world, you want to go down, check your oxygen. Here, make sure that that's functioning. Just hit your oxygen test button. Obviously we get a sound and so on. Want to make sure that that's fine. There are some other bits about checking that you should press and hold it for 5 seconds and the PSI doesn't drop by more than 100 on the overhead panel, and things like that. I'm not going to go into those details. At the end of the day, no one's going to bother really checking it other than to press it to make the fun sound happen. So that's that. You want to check your windows closed. Last thing you want to do is take off with your window open, though I'm pretty sure you'd notice if your window wasn't closed. That said, it could be just slightly ajar. There's no way of actually doing that in here, so it is worth just checking. Again, we know the sim's going to be functioning correct. We know that window's going to be closed, so don't need to worry about it too much. But in real world, they check that the window's shut. They then go over and get the ATIS. So at this point, you want to set up your EFIS. So they go over, they get the ATIS, they get all the information that they need. So in doing that, we would set our baro on the EFIS in hectopascals or inches of mercury, depending on where we are in the world. In this, I'm not going to bother going and getting the ATIS. I'm just going to cheat and hit B to see what the pressure is. Apparently the pressure is 1013, or B's not working, one or the other. Let me just check that actually. Just check that B is working. Oh yeah, there we go. 1013. The bot's now doing other things. It's still not working. Anyway, that's fine. Thanks, bot. So we set the baro. Presets are usually 1013. Yeah, so the presets are usually 1013. It should pick up the sim weather as well. So anyway, you go and get your ATIS, you get whatever your pressure is, and set that into the system. You also make sure that it's set on all three of the same. So 1013 there, 1013 on your backup instrument, and 1013 on the captain's side. Is there a way in the Max to have HPA set as default? No, unfortunately not. Or I certainly haven't found it. I've been through every single menu option on there, and I haven't found a way to make it default. So yeah, flick it over, change it to hectopascals. You then set, and this will be different on every airline, but you then set your primary flight displays up here with the information that you want. So most airlines, as far as I understand, will have airports marked on. They will also have probably waypoints marked on. I know one airline has terrain on the first officer's side and weather on the captain's side. Now, important point here, we don't switch the weather radar on at the moment. We don't switch the weather radar on until we are joining the runway, because then we're sending out radar beams and it sets everyone's weird traffic alerts and all sorts of fun stuff off. So weather radar, you will have it on when you're flying, but that doesn't go on at this point. You can set everything else but the weather radar. So that is that bit. Next on my list, he says, scrolling through his notes that he's made. There we go. So next we go through the overhead panel to start setting that up for flights. So with the Boeing, the overhead panel is broken down into 5 columns. 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. And you logically work through from top left to bottom right. So first things we do here with that is we want to make sure that our yaw damper's on. So we switch that on. So yeah, yaw damper comes on. Sorry, I'm just checking my notes for something because I did have an interesting fact about the yaw damper, but it's actually probably not that interesting, so I'm going to skip over it, quite frankly. If you want to know more about the yaw damper, send me a message and I'll give you the fun information. So we check that the yaw damper is on this column. Navigation, we are checking here that all 3 of these, you shouldn't need to touch them, all 3 of these should be in the center. That is correct. Yaw damper only works after alignment and will only function with hydraulic power as well, as far as I remember. Yes. It's powered by, alright, let's get into the nerdy stuff. It's powered by the hydraulic system B, and it has its own actuator, and it's connected in parallel with the main servo valve, but it's all powered off the B side hydraulic pumps. So if that side of your hydraulics fails and you've only got A, your yaw damper also won't work. So there you go, bit of nerdy information. Navigation, we're checking here. You shouldn't need to change these. These should always be set to normal. These switches go to the left and to the right, so you can change like your FMC, whether it's using the left systems or the right systems. They should all be in normal, so you're just checking that they're all in the center. Displays, again, should be in the center, and that should be on auto, so you don't need to worry about that. Just checking that they are all in the center. Next, we check our fuel. So with the fuel, you will know if your fuel panel is or how much fuel. You should know how much fuel you're taking on board. You'll have read your OFP, and you should have an amount of fuel, so you will know if you need your center pumps on. At this point, we haven't got any of our fuel pumps on. If we were on a stand where we don't have ground power, or we decided that we were going to switch the APU on at the start, you would have one of your 2 left-hand side fuel pumps on. I've seen a lot of people talking about which pump it should be, the aft or the forward pumps. I spent a day in a sim with a 737 pilot, and he said lots of people put the aft pump on. It's actually wrong. It should be the forward pump, or at least that's by his operator's guidance. It's the forward left pump that goes on to power the 737 APU. So we go through, we check. We don't need to switch that on at the moment because we're not running the APU, so we can leave them off for the moment until we need to switch them on. But we do need to check the crossfeed valve. Crossfeed valve should be straight up, so it's not active and it's closed. But what's interesting with this is we also need to check that the valve works. Now when we turn this, what you should see is that this light will come on. It should go bright and then go dim. So let's see if it does that first of all. So we turn the crossfeed valve. Valve open light came on, and as you saw, it went bright, and then it's gone to a dim value like that. Should do the same in reverse when we close it. So it should go bright and then switch off. The bright indicates that the valve is moving, and the dim indicates that it's finished moving and it's open. So we click that, valve open, it's turning when it's bright, and then it's open. It's a good check to do, just to know that your valve is functioning, it's turning, it's not getting stuck while it's turning or anything like that. If it got stuck, it would stay bright if it doesn't get to the point where it's fully open. So yeah, good check to do there, but we want to make sure that it's off and the light's off. So we check the fuel. We then carry on down through, so bottom bit of this column, we just want to make sure that our landing lights are switched off, which they are. Runway turn-off lights are off, and our taxi lights are off. You could argue that the runway turn-off lights and taxi lights are in this column. Wherever you want to check them, check them. One thing with the Max versus the NG, on the NG variant you've got on and off for your taxi lights. With the Max you've got auto and off, so you can see there we've got auto or off. I haven't yet worked out what auto means and how it knows to switch them on and off and what the criteria are. So personally, I come in, I just switch them off at the beginning of it. I know that I don't want them on at this point, so I make sure they're switched off. So up to the next column here, this bit is pretty easy. Don't need to worry about it too much. This is your electricity status screen. Shows you a load of information. We've already turned the battery on, it's the first thing we do, so you don't need to worry about that. You don't really need to check any of these, so you don't need to worry about that. One thing you do here in the iFly, you've got your cabin utilities and your in-flight entertainment and passenger seat power. In the PMDG they are modelled as on by default. In the iFly they're switched off. As I understand it, your this is generally left on all the time and never actually switched off. No one ever really bothers changing these switches, but you want to make sure they're on. Cabin utility will power your galley and give all your crew power, and obviously IFE and passenger seat power is what it says on the tin. So we switch those on at this point. Google says some airlines number the lights panel as 6, meaning it's done after 5. Ah, yes. Yeah, that's a really good point. So in terms of those light panels, yeah, which ones? So yeah, some of them do name them, and again, it'll all depend on the checklist that you do through whichever operator you've got. As an interesting point, so the checklist that I use for the 737 is JD's checklists. I know Murph's talked about them a fair bit in the past, but his 737 and his 777 checklists are pretty good. He does he does the full version of each of those checklists, so with all of the rainbow checks and everything that we've done. He then does a really nice simulator based truncated simplified one. So yeah, that's really useful. I'll put a link in Murph's Discord too, where JD's ones for the 7.3 are. Cinematic, first time chat, nice to see you, thank you for joining. The knobs show the voltage of each power source to be sure they work correctly. Yes, that's exactly correct. So the ones up here, it shows your frequency and your volts. So if you go through, you can see ground power is giving us a bunch of power. Gen 1's not giving us anything at the moment because it's not switched on. That's obviously engine number 1. APU's not giving us anything. But yes, you can go through and you can check that it's giving you the right amount of electricity and the battery's not discharging and things like that. But realistically, we don't need to check anything about that at the moment as we're going through this overhead panel. So next on our list then here is our power station. If we've switched our APU on, we'd probably want to be running off the APU gens. We can then get the ground power disconnected. We're not doing that at the moment. We can see that the engines are off and the gen is off bus, so we are not taking power. So we must be taking power from the ground because it's lit up. We haven't got a beeping thing saying we're using up the battery. So yeah, don't need to do anything with that. Want to check that the wipers are in park. Don't want the wipers going if we don't need them. We've checked those lights already. APU, if it's on, we want to check that it's switched on. If it's off, we want to check that it's off, and we don't want to check that it's on start. So that is that one. Oops, wrong button. Going back to this then. Middle column, column number 3. We've got circuit breaker lights and we've got panel brightness lights. We'll turn the panel brightness up a bit, just makes it a little bit easier to see things. Circuit breaker lights, you don't need to switch them on unless you need them on. Equipment cooling. Interesting fact here, or again, I find it interesting, others may not, but for whatever reason, this is the only 2 switches that don't follow the convention of on being down. So your equipment cooling, your supply and your exhaust, they're on and being in a normal situation is up for these 2. Every other switch on is down. Why Boeing did that, I have no idea. I haven't looked into it. I don't know if there's any logic behind it, but they're the only switches that are backwards. But again, you shouldn't need to in normal operations, and again with no random failures on, it's never going to be a problem. You just leave them alone. Emergency exit lights. We've already armed these. Guard is closed. Don't need to worry about that. No smoking lights. Should be on all the time. A lot of operators have hardwired this now so that it's just on all the time and you can't do anything about it. But the switch is here. Make sure it's on. Fasten seat belts. If your passengers are in and you've finished fueling, you can switch that on. Because when the plane is fueling, you should not have passengers belted in. You specifically have to, in case they have to get off quickly, be unbelted. But assuming you finished, you can switch that on at this point so that the fasten seatbelt lights come on. Down here, other wiper, check that that is in park. Engine start. We check that both of the engine starters are in off. And here, you... now this varies a little bit from operator to operator, I think, but in the Boeing manual you would always have it over to ignition right. The reason for that is that if ignition right doesn't work, you can't fly. It's a hard Boeing, I think, rule that if the right igniter doesn't function, then you shouldn't fly. If you're doing multiple flights, I've heard of airlines that switch it back and forth and do left and things, but certainly for the first flight of the day, as I understand it, you should always have it on igniter right. Rambog says, when I was flying to Ireland, the cabin crew specifically called out you should not put the seatbelts on because they were fueling. Never heard that before. Yeah, very, very standard. Yeah, the last thing you want to do is be belted in and a fire starts happening. I think most pilots use the no smoking switch as an aid memoir for cabin secure and takeoff clearance. Yes, either the no smoking or there is an attend button here. If you press that, it will make the same sort of dong, so depending on the plane they might use that one if you've got one of those. DVD combo, ignition right is connected to the AC standby bus. If it's in op, that's a no-go item. There we go. There's clearly someone here who's got a lot of knowledge about that. That's really useful. Thank you very much. So yeah, no-go item. So put it over to the right to start your engines. If it doesn't work, you can't go. So there we go. Right, another drink. Up to here then. So, or there is a procedure for maintenance. Yeah, so there's QRH things, and I can show you that later on. I've got the QRH to run through a few things if we get there. What's the time? 9:22. Okay. I think we're about on track. So, next then, this column, window heat. These are the only anti-icing systems that are on all the time, from basically as soon as you can to the point where you shut down the aircraft. So we switch those on. You should get a little flash of the overheat lights and then all 4 of them come on. the reason that we have those on all the time is, firstly, what we don't want is obviously ice build up on our screens. That would be bad. But it is also for strength. So you imagine you're up at, you know, highest operating altitude for the max is 41,000 feet. You're up at 41,000 feet. It's blooming cold out there. Glass is more brittle at and whatever materials the windows are made of, it's more brittle obviously cold temperatures. So the window heat will keep it at a decent temperature all the way through, and that's for strength. And if you imagine you're coming down from 41,000 feet, you get down to, you know, 20,000 feet, 15,000 feet, all the air is still rushing past. It's still pretty cold, and that glass isn't going to have time to have heated up from just, you know, you're at normal ambient temperature if you're on the outside. Even if you haven't got any clouds, it's a beautiful clear day. Last thing you want is a bird strike and have a cold window, because that's going to be really brittle and break. So the windows are kept at a reasonable temperature at all times for strength. So that's why we turn them on and why they're on all of the time. Probe heats, they don't need to do anything with those at the moment. They come on when the engines come on. Moving down to the wing, the anti-ice. If we are in cold weather ops, then we may switch these on the ground. However, I'm not 100% sure, and I will find out more for the next tutorial on exactly what on the ground cold weather ops denotes. I do have, if this works, hopefully, here we go, the operating handbook for the 737. In terms of when you turn these on in flight, for the wing anti-ice and the engine anti-ice, they are powered by hot bleed air from the engines. The rules that Boeing state are they should be switched on when icing conditions exist, when the outside air temperature or the static air temperature in flight is 10 degrees or below, 10 degrees C or below, 50 degrees Fahrenheit, and there is visible moisture, clouds, fog with visibility less than 1 mile away, rain, snow, sleet, ice crystals and so on, if that is present. Standing water, ice or snow is present on the ramps, taxiway or runways. Well, there we go. I've just answered my question about the ground side of it. So if you've got standing water and the temperature is below 10 degrees C, you switch them on. Or snow is present on the ramps, taxiways or runways. So there we go. So we can check what the temperature is. There's two ways of doing that. So if we quickly go to our FMC here, well, firstly, we should have our static air temperature here, 18. So we don't need that on at the moment. And there is also in, I believe, progress page 2. Sorry, that's our actual air temperature, TAT. Our static air temperature here is on the... fudge. Thanks, Dougal. So you got our TAT here, in-flight air temperature, I think that is, or our static air temperature here is shown on the FMC. So on progress section of here, and I'll come on to more of that in a minute as well, but on page 2 of your progress menu on the FMC, you've got your static air temperature there, and that's showing 18 at the moment. So we don't need to switch those on now, but that's the requirement. And it's one thing, I'll be honest, I always forget the icing side of things when we're flying. So when you get to, you know, 15, 20,000 feet, if you're not checking and keeping an eye on your temperatures and you fly through a cloud, you really should be switching that anti-icing on. Really important point to note is this bit here. Do not operate engine or wing anti-ice when in flight and the total air temperature is above 10 degrees C. So if it's above 10, don't switch it on. Could potentially lead to engine overheating. Secondly, And I don't know if it is in there. It's not, but it does say it on the overhead panel. Back up to the overhead panel, get rid of the SOP. I thought it said it on the overhead panel. So if you are above what is it? I think it's I'm gonna have to double check this. Did I write it in my other notes? I'm sure I did. Hold on. Hold on. Icing. There we go. Ah, yes. The exception is if your static air temperature or TAT is below 40 degrees C. Sorry, minus 40 degrees C. If it is below minus 40 C, then you switch it back off. The reason for that is that the... Now, what was the reason for that? I did write it down. Yes, here we go. It's... No, I can't remember what the reason is for it now. I'm going to confirm that. I'll come back to you on that. But the main important bits to note, under 10C in... Yes, I think it's something to do with that. I will double check that and come back to you on exactly why that is. I've forgotten that bit. I thought I'd written it down, but I haven't. But the main crux of it is between plus 10 degrees Celsius and above minus 40 C, so anywhere between 0 and minus 40, it's on if there is visible moisture. Below 40 C, so you know, minus 50, minus 55, whatever it is, then you switch it off. There is a reason for that. It's to do with the cabin pressurization, but I can't. It's gone out of my head what exactly it was for, but it's to do with the cabin pressurization and the air, the bleeds, because the system, the anti-ice, the wing anti-ice and the engine anti-ice uses, as I say, that bleed air. So it puts hot air over the fan blades to prevent build-up on there, or it pushes hot air out onto the leading edges of the wings to melt off any ice and prevent that ice build-up. Yeah, it's something to do along with those. So, moving on past anti-ice, I spent a bit too long on that really. It's not that much fun. Next, hydraulic pumps. By this point, in real-world ops, you're either your first officer or your captain, whoever is doing the walk-around, should be back by this point. They'll have done their walk-around, and they'll be back. They'll be able to tell you there's no one down by the gears. They're not working on the gears. We're all good. We can switch on the electronic hydraulic pumps now. So at this point, we switch those on, we get them all powered up, and you can see here some of these lights changed up here. So your flight controls, you can see the low pressure light just came on for a second and then went off, because that's now, we're getting hydraulic pressure going around the plane. So now your flight controls are starting to work. Your yaw damper light came on for a second. Again, pressure building up, going into it. Yaw damper is now, we've switched it on already, the light's not on, it's up, it's functioning, so that's all good. Here is your door panel, so all these lights indicate which doors are open. At the moment we've only got our forward entry door, but yeah, at this point you know what doors you're expecting to have open, so you just check that the light's right. Your pressurization panel here, we're checking at this point that both of these are at 0. We don't want any pressure differences, or you know, we don't want the cabin altitude increasing or decreasing. We've got a door open, so that's not going to happen, but we just want to make sure both of these are 0. We've already checked our engine starters. At this point I tend to check the lights as well. Interesting point with the iFly. The PMDG, the lights are in the right position for cold and dark. With the iFly, I've noticed they're the wrong way round for the position lights and the anti-collision lights. At cold and dark, this should be set to steady and the anti-collision lights should be off. But if we go back outside, you can see we've got all the lights flashing. We're lit up like a Christmas tree. It's actually backwards. So if we go back into the cabin, and I've not been able to find a way to change that, but drop it down to steady and the anti-collision lights are off. I've actually put a note on my checklist just at the beginning, so when I'm doing the battery, switching the battery on and starting the IRSs and stuff, I actually just go and flick those lights first of all. Yeah, slightly frustrating. Hopefully they'll fix it in a bug fix coming up. All your other lights really should be off. You may have, if it's night time and someone's looking at your wheels or something, you have your wheel well light on, but and if it's night time you might stick your logo light on. But for the moment we're in the daytime, everything else should be off and your position light should be on steady. And then up to the top here, cabin temperature stuff. As I understand, this panel is a massive pain in the arse. It's super sensitive, and is often the reason why you're either far too hot in a plane or far too cold in a plane, because these little dials are very, very sensitive, and it's just not very good. So in the sim, we don't need to worry about it. Just leave it alone. Down to our air panel. So at this point, we want to be turning our packs on. They're not going to do anything at the moment. Our APU's not on, but we want to know that they're on, so we turn the packs on to auto. We want our isolation valve open at the moment, and we want to make sure that our engine bleeds are on. Again, they won't very often be switched off, they'll just be left on. If the engines are on, we want the bleeds to be working. If the engines are off, it's not going to be passing any air, so that's fine. APU, if we've got our APU on, we want to switch our APU bleed on. If we don't have our APU on, then we leave it switched off. And then finally here we've got our pressurization panel. This is where you put in your flight level that you're going to, and for today's flight we have a flight altitude of, he says, trying to remember, it's the red circle at the bottom of this screen, 380. I'll come back to the OFP shortly, but we set that to 380, and we are landing. Our flight plan that we will be working through is Gothenburg through to Dublin. I know that Dublin, our landing altitude is going to be 250 feet. Dougal says, I'm lazy, have my outs set to auto in the EFB. Fair enough, that makes sense. It would probably make my life a lot easier if I did that as well. The number of times I've forgotten to do it and then got warning lights and had to go through the QRH and stuff. So yes, you can set them to auto in the EFB. But we set that other important point. And again, in the sim, it's always going to be on auto. You don't need to worry about it. But this switch should always be an auto. Manual, you can get yourself into a massive world of hurt because you can depressurize the cabin really quickly with this valve if you open and close it and so on. So just always make sure that's in auto. If you get into a situation where you need to turn it to alternate or manual, I'd be going into the EFB and going clear the failures. I don't want to deal with that, please, thank you very much. So that then is our overhead panel, and this is the lights that we should have on at the moment. Airbus work on a lights off. Yes, emergency descent down to flight level 10. Yes, definitely. Don't want to be doing that. Airbus work on an element of lights should always be off, and Boeing do the same at the point when you're ready for takeoff, or when everything's all set up. So we've still got some lights on at the moment. Your pitot heat lights are on. We haven't turned our fuel pumps on at the moment, so they're still on. Engines aren't running. As I understand it, Airbus should be off all the time, and it only lights up if there's a problem, I think. But Boeing, the aim is that this will all be off apart from your green window heat lights and a few others, but all your amber lights should be off at the point when you take off. So we've done the overhead panel, that's all good. We now move down to the MCP. It says, trying to find the right button, there we go. So we're now doing the MCP. We've already done our ephyses, we've set our baro already, pretty much. There's some that are on during setup, like fuel pumps, but most are off, unless there's something to be looked at, says Rambog. Yeah, thank you very much. I don't know the Airbuses very well. It's one of my goals to learn the Airbuses after World Flight has been completed this year. So, yeah, MCP, or the mode control panel. At this point we're setting a few bits and bobs in there. So we want to switch the flight directors on. Flight directors, whichever one you switch on first will be the master, and the one that you want the master to be, it depends on who the pilot flying is for the day. So if you've got your first officer doing being pilot flying for the leg, you would switch that one on first, and a little light comes on here to say that this is the master, then you switch this one on. If it was the other way round, you would switch on the captains first and the first officers after. If you switch the master off, it will automatically transfer master over to the one that's left on, and if you switch them both off, obviously they're both then off. In this case, with the captain, we'll be the pilot flying as well, so we switch them both on. Captain's is on master, and the first officer's is just on, but we can see that the switch is on. Heading, we need to set this to our runway heading. We're taking off runway 21 from Gothenburg, and if we have a look at our charts, he says, going over here, and we have a look at our airport information, you should see that runway 21 there is got a heading of 202. So we take this round to 202, and we set that into the MCP. We also will need to set our initial altitude. Now we haven't got clearance yet. Yeah, thank you, Ambug, for that. Yeah, heading 202. Altitude, we would set our initial climb. Now we haven't got our clearance yet, so we haven't been given one. However, our charts may also tell us, and if I bring back up my screen here with my charts on, we can actually see here that the initial climb clearance is 5,000 unless otherwise specified. So we may be told something different in the clearance that we get, but other than that, we know it's 5,000. So we can pretty much expect it's going to be that. So we set 5,000 in our MCP. Now, I know of pilots, and I've been told by pilots, that some will set 5,100 in there, and I will tell you why in a little bit. I'll come on to that shortly. Rambog says, altitude in the charts. We aren't technically supposed to give it in the clearance unless it's not 5,000. Yeah, we just give it because VATSIM pilots don't tend to read the charts. Yeah, exactly that, and that's what, you know, that text says. Initial climb clearance is 5,000 unless otherwise specified. So yeah, they won't tell you. They may on VATSIM, as Rambog's just said, but yeah, 5,000 coming out of Gothenburg. So we set those altitude. So the first stop on our departure. So that is set up. I think that is everything on the MCP at the moment. Yep, good. So we then move down here a little bit, and at this point we want to be setting auto brakes. These are in slightly different positions on the Max and the NG. You'll be able to find where it is on the NG. But at this point we want to be setting our auto brakes. We're taking off, so we want them to RTO. So that gets switched. Navigraph is still up. Thank you very much, Rambog. So yeah, we'll get rid of that. So RTO, we set that there, and it's up here on the. Or it's a little bit higher actually, because you've got a screen on the NG down here, and it's just above the screen and slightly to the right-hand side of it, next to the flap, the manual flap gauge on the NG. You're also checking, again, this is a double check, but you check that the standby ISFD is, the QNH is set right on there, so 1013 hectopascals, which we've already set, so that's all good. And we're making sure that they are all set. At this point, I always forget to set the standby. Yeah, me too. I'm not very good at it, but it says it on JD's checklist. So yeah, good to use them. But again, it's laziness. If you press B when you're setting the thing, it automatically sets the standby instrument as well. I believe he says, or does it not? No. Oh, yes, there you go. It does. My keyboard had just gone to sleep. Yeah. So if you press B, it does. Flying tonight on the MCP. Do we also set both course dials to 202? For Arnav SIVs, yes, you do. Yeah, I'll come on to the course in a bit as we're putting in some of the routing, and I'm conscious that it's 9:44, but we'll keep going. We may end up going to sort of 10:30 or so, but that's fine. I want to make sure we get through everything on here. But yes, you would set something in the course, but that comes a little bit later on. So, loving the detail. Good. I'm glad your guys are enjoying it. So that's RTO set on there. We then now come down to the throttle. My buttons aren't working. Why aren't my buttons working? Because I haven't clicked the sim. There we go. That one. So we now come down to the throttle and the center pedestal. So we check that the speed brake is stowed. So unlike the Airbus, we want to make sure that the speed brakes are down. It's as far forward as you go. So just make sure you give that a good shove forwards to make sure that it is. Thank you very much, Flying Tonight. Also glad you're enjoying it. So we push the speed brake forwards. We check that our flaps are all up. So we don't want flaps in any other position other than up and in the 0 position. Again, here is another point in the checklist where it's like a double check. DVD Combo says if you are executing a conventional SID, you would set the initial course on the PF side and then the following course on the PM side as a reminder. Cool. Okay. So many tutorials I've seen are rushed, and this is first class. Thank you very much, Dougal. I'm appreciative of that. It was really good for me as well, actually. It's reminded me of a lot of things that I tend to have skipped a little bit and probably got a little bit lazy at. So I've enjoyed doing the research to put this all together. We do another test right now to make sure that the thrust lever configuration horn warning is still sounding. The naughty Fabio, for sure. I like it. Yes, Fabio's tutorials were fantastic, actually. I always liked his, and I actually learnt a lot of what I know about the 737 from Fabio himself. His tutorial videos were fantastic, so it's good to be able to emulate even just slightly like him. We just push the throttles forward again, next thing on the checklist, just to make sure that beep is still working. Start levers, we now check. DVD Combo, you fly in this in real life. Well, that's fantastic, and yeah, if I do get anything wrong, as you can see from the bottom of the screen, I am in no way a 737 pilot. I've just been lucky enough to spend a lot of time learning it and get some time with 737 pilots. So yeah, good to have you watching this and in the chat. Thanks very much. Next, then we check is the start levers. We make sure they're to cut off. We don't want any fuel flowing into the engines or anything at the moment, so we make sure that they're set to cut off. Radios, you would at this point set your radios up, so you put your the frequencies that you would expect in whatever those frequencies are for the airport you're at. You've already gone and got your ATIS, so that should be in there. In terms of clearance for Gothenburg, we are 121.680, so you'd probably set that in there, as that's the first thing you're going to be going and getting. 121.680. Probably could have gone the other way around here. I haven't got my radio panel switched on, so I'm having to do it with my mouse, which takes a little bit of time. There we go, 121.680, throw that over and we should get the clearance. Obviously no one's online on VATSIM at the moment, which is this little pop-up that you see here. So that is there. You'd then probably put in your next expected one, so after that it's going to be ground. So you put that into your standby so that you're ready, you're all set up. Next, you would set up your navigational radios. Now this is the bit that I'm not so hot on in terms of VORs, and depending on your departure you might set some different VORs in there. I've talked with a couple of pilots in the past and they've talked about setting them up in the eventuality that you lose the FMC. Let's say that the FMC stops working, you need to go back to traditional IFR methods of flying and using your VOR, your VORs and your traditional ways of navigating, which I'm not 100% on. Realistically here, again, talking about the sim, if you've not got random failures on, your FMC's not going to crap out on you, it's not going to stop working. You may have programmed it wrong, in which case you might have a problem. But yes, Dougal, just like you, I am hopeless for VORs. I tend to ignore that. If you want to find out more information on that, there are other resources on YouTube that will be better off explaining it than I. I don't want to be giving half-baked information, so I'm sort of going to skip over that a little bit just because I don't particularly understand it. But at this point you would put in VORs and set your navigation up properly. Thank you very much for the follow, DVD Combo. I appreciate that. I will say, DVD Combo, if you missed the beginning of it, I am not a streamer. I don't stream that often. I will be streaming. I'm taking part in World Flight next week. I'm flying along with 10 or 11 of the legs, and I will be streaming all of those just to, do something while I'm flying along. But generally I don't stream, so yeah, you probably won't see me around too much on here, but yes, thank you very much for the follow, very appreciated. At this point you now would set your transponder. If you've received a transponder, if you've done your clearance already, you would set your squawk code in there. Otherwise you would set 2000. Another interesting point with the iFly, the cold and dark state, your transponder is set TARA by default. You should be on alt off in the Max or on standby in the NG. So yeah, you just want to make sure, especially if you're connecting to VATSIM, just flick that back to alt off. And if you haven't received your clearance set, you can set 2000 as your squawk code for the moment until you get your clearance. Lastly, you're checking your rudder trims. Again, not so important in the sim. No, there is no CPDLC in the iFly as of yet. So you would need to use something like Easy CPDLC and so on. Next thing to check then is your rudder trim, making sure that that's at 0 and all looking correct. You can move it away and move it back. You're also checking your aeroline trim is correct as well. Again, you know it's going to be right. You know there's not going to be any failures, so I don't really ever bother with that in the sim. But that's our center pedestal. You would then check some bits about the ground proximity warning. So you do a system test here.
Glide slope.
It's going to shout at us a bit now. We'll have some fun here.
Wind shear, wind shear, wind shear. Terrain, terrain. Pull up. Obstacle,
Ooh,
obstacle. Pull up. Sink rate. Pull up. Don't sink. Too low, terrain. Too low, gear. Too low, flaps. Glide slope. Bank angle, bank angle.
Approaching minimums. Minimums. 2,500. 1,000.
Oh, does it really go through all of this? I apologise, I forgot it went through all of this.
300. 200. 100. 50. 40. 30. 20. 10.
Wind shear, wind shear, wind shear. Too low, terrain.
I do
Caution,
believe I might have pressed it
Caution,
twice,
terrain.
which is
Terrain, terrain. Pull up.
why it's going
Caution,
on more.
obstacle. Caution, obstacle.
Right, I'm just
obstacle,
going to
obstacle. Pull up.
turn the sim down for the moment. Oh, is it finished? Hold on, it's finished. Okay, there we go. I'll put the sim noise back up now. It's finished. There we go. Sorry about that. But yeah, you press that button and it tests it. Again, you know it's going to work. Let's just move on from that. Don't ever press that button again. In the real world, press it. Also, don't use this guide in the real world. Cool. So that is all of our other panels set up for the moment. Next, then, we go into the FMC. So, we move over to our FMC and we need to get this set up. So, I've obviously moved over to the progress page, but if we go back to here, we go back to our index, where we would have left it is on not the route page, index, ident, wasn't it? That's where we would have left it. So we would have been on the pos init page, and as I've mentioned, it the FMC guides you through. So it's always the next thing to do should be here. So the next thing to do is our route. So we click the bottom right soft key. And it takes us through to the route page. Now, there's some differences between the PMDG variant and the iFly variant here. There's also some similarities. You've got to log off now. No worries. Thank you very, very much for this. The VOD will be available. So, yeah, I will finish this tutorial. I will make sure that the VOD's available and everyone will be able to watch back any that they can't get to. So, in terms of the FMC, thank you very much for the follow. There we go. In terms of the FMC, the iFly and the PMDG both have integration with SimBrief. If we go and have a look over here, you can set your SimBrief in the EFB up here. So if we switch this on, and I'll come on to a lot more about this in a bit. If you go into the system page and into sim menu, you've got a number of different options here, but your ACARS page is where you set your SimBrief ID. So you click on that, you put your SimBrief ID in there, and then you hit set. Very important, you hit set when you've finished it. With this, there's a lot of pages where you have to hit set for it to save that information in there. So as long as you've put that in, your SimBrief integration should work. So if we go back to here, there are two methods of putting your route into the FMC. Firstly, if you just hit flight plan request, it will check if you've got a SimBrief ID, and it will then go and check, based on that SimBrief ID, what is the last SimBrief flight plan you generated on the system. So if I hit that now, it will go away, it will talk to SimBrief, and it will say, hold on a minute, is there a plan that's recent and generated by this user? And you can see here it now says Route 1 uplink ready, and if you hit load, it will then import from SimBrief your most recent flight plan, which just so happens to be Gothenburg to Dublin, which is where we're going. It fills in the company route with that information. I don't know if that's particularly accurate. I don't think company routes used that much by airlines, but I might be wrong. But it's put that information in there. And then if you go to your route page, he says, why is that not letting me go to the route page? Oh, because I'm already on the route page. Oh, wake up. Sorry, if you go to your second page of the route page, you can see here that it's now put in our route. Now we've not activated it yet, we've not put it in, but it's loaded it up, it's put what SimBrief has got in there, and it's filled all the information in for you. That's the easiest way to do it. I've been doing my weight and performance in the EFB before the route. Does that matter? I don't believe it does. It matters if you do it before the performance initialization, but I don't think it should matter from the route, as I understand it and as I've been doing it. I'll come on to the performance initialization in a bit. So that is one way of pulling in from SimBrief. You can also, if you've been super active on SimBrief and doing lots of different flight plans, or you've got an older flight plan that you want to repeat, it can search through your previously activated flight plans. So we'll just clear this out for the moment. If you've got a route in here and you delete the origin, it will clear everything out. So if we now go to the next page, you can see all of our routes being cleared. So just press the delete key, go to your origin, that will clear that out. That's cleared the route out. Now I know that last Thursday I went from LOWW through to LUKK. So if you put your origin and your destination in and press request flight plan, it's now doing exactly the same thing, but it's looking for a flight plan that matches that. Has this user generated a flight plan from LOWW to LUKK? And it says Route 1 uplink ready, loading. And it will then pull down the information for that particular. So it's now put that company route in there. If we go to the next page, you can see we've got a completely different route in there. So you can search back through old ones. If you put in something that doesn't match, so if I clear this out and I go, let's say I go LOWW to LOWW to ESGG. I know I've never done that and I've never generated that. If you put that in and hit request flight plan, it will go through and look, and I believe it comes back with an error. It either comes back with an error or it tells me it's ready to load and then just loads nothing. So let's find out on the fly. Here we go, LOWW to ESGG. It says it's loading in a flight plan. If we go to here, interestingly, it's put it in. I've never generated that, so I don't know quite what it's doing there, or where it's pulling that flight plan from, or if that's even right. So Yeah, don't know with that integration there. I know that if you put one in that you've done, it will pull it in correctly. I don't know quite how it's doing that. I'm fairly sure I've never on SimBrief. I'm gonna have to check. Hold on, I'm having a look. My flight plans. Have I ever done ESGG to? LOWW. No, it certainly doesn't say I've ever got that in my saved or previously generated. Interestingly, it only holds my last 20 generated. Show more. Nope, I do not see that in there, so yeah, not 100% sure why. Let's do one more test quickly, just to see if we can work out this. I have definitely never flown from some where have I never flown from? Where have I never flown from? Someone give me a ICAO that I've never flown from. There we go. Yeah, that's a good one. Thank you very much. ESNU. I have definitely never flown from. I don't even know where that is. ESNU to ESGG. Request that. Let's see what it does now. UMIA. Okay, well there we go. It's coming up. It seems to have found something. I don't know if it's then going off to anywhere in SimBrief and looking at all the generated ones. It's put a route in. No idea. Don't know how that integration's working. But I know I've tested it with 3 or 4 of my previously generated flight plans, and I know that it pulls in mine. It may well be that it defaults to, okay, that user hasn't got one, has anyone else ever created one on SimBrief? Anyway, that also works. Can you check which flight plan that is current in SimBrief now? What, as in which of my flight plans is current? My current one is, or are you talking about all of SimBrief? I don't know. Don't know if you can do that. Yeah, no idea. Anyway, we'll get back to this. So, go back to our first page on our route. So this method of entering the route from SimBrief, view flight plan in SimBrief. Oh yeah, my current one is ESGG to EIDW. Oh, are you asking if it's changed it in SimBrief? Oh, I see. No, my current flight plan is still ESGG to EIDW, so it's not overwritten my flight plan or anything like that. So it's not generated one for me. I see what you're getting at. So that method of pulling in information from SimBrief works for both the iFly and the PMDG. So you can put in your origin and your destination and search for a route that you've previously done, or you can hit request flight plan and it'll pull down your most recent one from your user. What you can also do with the PMDG that you can't with the iFly at the moment, when you're in your EFB on the PMDG, if you go into where the electronic flight bag section, you can load in your route from SimBrief in there, and it will give you all the Navigraph maps and all that sort of stuff. When you come to this page, this route page, there will be an option to automatically load in from the EFB the route, the SimBrief route, and it will set your weight and balance on here. So it will load that in, it will pull in your information from SimBrief and say, do you want to set your fuel? Do you want to set your passengers and cargo? And you can click the buttons on the FMC here to set them. You can't do that in the iFly at the moment. I'm hoping they bring it in because, as you'll see in a minute, you've got to do all of that manually. But they're the different integrations between the PMDG and the iFly. So the what I'm going to do is show you how to manually enter your route into the FMC. Because yes, we can pull it in from SimBrief, and 99 times out of 100 you're probably going to do that, but you might want to, maybe SimBrief's down and you still want to fly, so maybe you want to put it in manually. So to do that, I am going to bring up our SID, and hopefully you should be able to see this. Excellent. So this is, I should bring up our SID, I meant our OFP. So this is all of our information, and on page 2 of our OFP you have our routing here. Now how you do this varies, as I understand it, from operator to operator, but it's exactly the same with the first page. So we are going from ESGG and we are going to EIDW, so we put them in. You've then got to put your flight number in, and that's really important. So that's what ATC will see on their screens. It's what appears on in the real world, Flight Radar 24. So you need to make sure that you put that in correctly. So you put in your flight number, FFA 301 for me. So we put that in, and then that is that information in. We then need to tell it what we're doing. Now you can see from our OFP on the left hand side here. So we're leaving, is my pen going to work? We are leaving ESGG, runway 21, and we are going from the Vadin 3 Juliet departure to Vadin, and then a number of other things which I'll come on to in a minute. Now here you wouldn't put, this isn't the same as the legs page, so you wouldn't put all of your, you know, steps on your all of your different waypoints on your departure or anything like that in here. I find realistically you should put the route in here first. That's the standard flow, but I find it's actually easier to go to your departures and arrival page first, and I know that there are operators that do this and certainly pilots that do this, and you put that those details in first. So if we put in our departure, we click on this, you can see here we've got a selection of SIDs and a selection of runways. Interesting point, if you go back to your route and you put in here what runway you're departing from, I missed that, if we put runway 21 in and then go back to our departures, you can see it automatically selects runway 21 here for us because we've told it we're taking off from runway 21. DVD Combo, thank you very much. Really appreciate your information and your help there. Take care. Thank you very much for joining. Nice to see you. So next thing we do is, yeah, we need to tell it what departure we're doing and what runway we're doing. So one thing here, you can see at the moment we've got 4 pages of SIDs and we're taking off in the Vadin 3 Juliet departure, which these are alphabetical, our SIDs. It's a lot of clicking to get down there, you know. We're on to, crikey, we're on to page 4 before we find it. Little tip, if you press and select the runway again, I know it's already selected, but if you do it again, it narrows, it filters down all of your different SIDs to only the ones that apply to runway 21. So you've now gone down to 2 pages and you only have to click the button once, and I'm all for saving my fingers and having to click too many keys. So we go to page 2, we choose the Vadin 3 Juliet departure. So that's theirs, there's no transition on the Vadin 3 Juliet, so that is now selected. We then go back to our route and go to page 2. You can now see Vadin 3 Juliet's on there to Vadin, and if we have a look at our OFP on the left hand side, you can see it says runway 21, less risk of misclicking the wrong SID as well. Yep, really good point there, Rambog. Juliet Mike in this case. Yeah, so if you've got very similar departures off your two different runways, yeah, much less chance of clicking the wrong one. Very good point. So we've got Vadin 3 Juliet to Vadin, and we can see from our OFP on the left hand side it says runway 21, Vadin 3 Juliet, and then Vadin is our next point. Great, so that's in there, so we know that's right. Next is it says M852. Well, that's pretty weird. If we go and have a quick look here at Navigraph, these are our airways, so numbers like that indicate airways. So if we zoom in a bit, you can see we've got our departure here, which is the Vadin 3 Juliet, so that pink is our SID, and then we get to Vadin, and then it says we take M852, and we can see that that airway there, there's a blue line underneath this, but you can just see it says M852 there. It might be a little bit small on the screen, but I can't do much about that. And you can see all the other blue lines here, all different airways. Think of them as highways and intersections, basically. So our routing takes us on the M852, so we are going via the M852, double checks it, and then it goes, well, hold on a minute, you're going along there, where are you going to? We've got these boxes now that says you have to put this information in. So the next point on our list is to ALS, so then we put that in, ALS like that. Excellent, so that's now filled that in, so that's the next bit done. We're then taking from ALS November 872, so we fill that in, 872, we're going via that highway to Eel, E-E-L, and then from Eel we've got a DCT, so that's a direct to Supper, so we're not taking an airway at this point, we're just going direct. Now you don't need to put direct in the left hand side here. The next point that we really care about is Supper, so we put that in, and we can just put that in too, and it automatically fills the direct in for us, so we don't have to type that in. Once we got to Supper, we've got another airway, so it's L60, throw that in there, and then where are we going to on that? That's Penil. So we are taking the L60 to the Penil intersection. Move on to the next page because we've run out of space. We're now taking Uniform Lima UL 28 to Leldo, and I always get this one wrong every single time. I call it Ledlow, and it's not, it's Leldo, and I always type it in wrong. If you type one in wrong, so here we go, let's do what I always do. What do I do? Yeah, I do Ledlow, so if I type in Ledlow, put that in, it goes, not in the database. And if you're unlucky enough that you put in something that, if you're doing a direct and you put in a waypoint that's wrong, you'll notice it on the legs page when we go through the checking, because your mileage will most likely be very out and your map will look really stupid. But we are going from across Uniform Lima 28 to Leldo, LDO. Throw that in there. Then M145 into there, and that brings us to Bagso. I don't know why, but I love that waypoint, Bagso, just makes me smile. So we put that in. Next, you can see on our plan, we've got the Bagso for Lima arrival into 28 right. Now, again, this is where, depending on airline operating procedures and things, you may want to put this in before you take off. You may want to see and wait based on the weather. If you know the weather's going to be changing or something, you might not want to put it in and talk to ATC and get clearance. For the purposes of this demonstration, I'm going to put it in now. So if we go to EIDW, we go into the arrival page. Again, we want to filter this down. This has got 8 pages of information. We know from the plan we filed that we're planning to land on runway 28 right. So we click that, it filters it down. We've now only got 3 pages, and we know that we are doing the BAGSO for Lima arrival. So we look into our stars, and there's your BAGSO for Lima arrival. Click that. We don't know what the transition will be. At this point, we would get that through clearance. Most likely, I'm going to expect it to be Obinu, so I will select Obinu. If we then go back to our route and scroll through our pages, you can see that's where we put up to M145 BAGSO, and it's now put in the BAGSO for Lima arrival with the Obinu transition to on the ILS of runway 2 right. It's put in that we're landing on that, and then it's also put in our go around information as well. So it's used the database it's got in its systems to activate all of that. And that is our route in the system manually. Obviously, as I say, you can do it from SimBrief, much easier to do all of that. So at this point, we activate that and I execute it. I'm not sure if that's exactly the right position to execute it, but that's what I do. And if we go to the legs now, we can now see that we've got all of our different waypoints in there. One of the main differences between route and legs is that this, obviously, as I've said, we've told it which airway we're going on, or which SID we're using, but it doesn't give us all the waypoints that are on that. So VADIN, we then go to ALS via M5852. If we go to the legs and scroll through to where VADIN is, there's VADIN. The next thing in our route is ALS, but actually there's 2 waypoints between that. There's GoDog and Adson. So that legs page shows you every single one. Yes, landing 28 right. That's what SimBrief gave me. I know it's wrong, but that's what SimBrief gave me, and it gives me every single time, and I always forget to change it. So yes, we're landing 28 right. We're rebels. So we've now got our legs page all set up, and with that, what I'm actually going to have to do, because I have an early start for work tomorrow, so I'm going to have to hold it here. I know we said we were going to get to the takeoff and lined up with the runway, but it's taken me a bit longer to explain things than I thought it would. So I am going to have to pause here, and we'll switch the iPad off, and we will have to come back to our tutorial on the rest of this. So then the next things that we need to do, check our routes, make sure that it's all right on the map, so going to the plan, doing all of that, pushbacks, engine starts, all of that side of it. That will have to come in the next tutorial, I'm afraid, because it's taken me a good chunk longer than I was expecting. I hope everybody has enjoyed it. I've got some good feedback so far, so thank you to those that have given good feedback. Thank you to DVD Combo for jumping in and answering some of the questions and clarifying some points. Really, really handy. And it shows I'm not talking complete rubbish, that he seemed to think, or she seemed to think, that I was doing good. So yeah, thank you very much everybody for joining. When we join back, I will schedule the next time to do this. It's probably going to be a couple of weeks before I can get back to this, because I've got World Flight coming up on next week, so I've got a few days off work and I'll be doing lots of flights. Probably the week after that I will be able to get back to it, and we will carry on from this exact position here, all set up, and we'll jump straight into it and go on to the next sections of the tutorial. So yeah, thank you very much everybody for your time. Yes, I will announce on Discord. I will do exactly what I've done on the Two Tone Murphy Discord. For anyone that isn't a member of that, come over, join us at Murph's Discord. I'll put another event in Discord. I will make sure it's well shouted about in advance of when I'm going to do this next tutorial. I suspect it will be a Tuesday again. I think most realistically, he says, just trying to double check the calendar. Where are we? So not next week. Tuesday the 12th of November is provisionally the best. Is the next Tuesday that I'll do. So not next Tuesday, but the Tuesday after. I need to double check my calendar and make sure I haven't got anything on then. But I think that'll probably be when we get to the next one. And we will go through this. But in the meantime, you've got a good chunk of information on getting it set up and getting us to the point where you've got the route in the FMC. And then we'll go on to weight and balances and all sorts of fun stuff like that, and the audio performance, initialization and all that data. So yeah, thank you very much everybody for joining. I hope you all have great evenings. I will see you over on Discord. For those of you that are joining on the VATSIM Thursday flights, I will see you over there. I'll post some information about the route that we're taking probably tomorrow evening. But yeah, other than that, thank you very much everybody. Have great evenings, and I will see you all later. I don't have any fancy music on my ending screen, so it will just go to ending. But I might see if I can find a way to raid Murph. So thanks very much everybody. See you all later.